Picture this. You're scrolling through your childhood memories, and suddenly something feels wrong. You could swear the Berenstain Bears were spelled with an E, not an A. You remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father." But when you watch the movie, he actually says, "No, I am your father." You're certain Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, but he actually lived until 2013. What's happening to your mind? Welcome to the world of the Mandela Effect, where thousands of people share identical false memories that feel more real than reality itself. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. Some researchers believe there's a connection between these collective memory shifts and the most powerful scientific instrument ever built. Deep beneath the Swiss-French border, in a tunnel stretching 17 miles underground, scientists at CERN are smashing particles together at nearly the speed of light in the Large Hadron Collider. Could humanity's quest to unlock the secrets of the universe have accidentally torn holes in the fabric of reality itself? Are we living in a different timeline than the one we were born into? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most mind-bending conspiracy theories of our time, where cutting-edge quantum physics meets the darkest corners of human consciousness. Welcome to ConspiraNap. I'd love to know where you're joining from today. And if these stories interest you, I'd love for you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as ConspiraNap puts out content regularly, and we strive to reach fellow like-minded and curious individuals. Over the next hour, I'm going to take you on a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about memory, reality, and the nature of existence itself. We'll explore the scientific evidence, examine the testimonies of those who've experienced these reality shifts firsthand, and investigate whether the world's most advanced particle accelerator might be doing something far more dangerous than anyone imagined. But first, let me tell you why this matters more than you might think. The implications of what we're about to discuss go far beyond simple memory glitches. If even a fraction of what we're going to explore is true, then everything we understand about the nature of reality, consciousness, and our place in the universe needs to be completely reconsidered. You see, the Mandela Effect isn't just about misremembering cartoon characters or movie quotes. It's about the fundamental question of whether our reality is stable, or whether we're living in a multiverse where timelines can be altered, shifted, or merged. And the timing of when these effects started being widely reported. It coincides almost perfectly with some of the most significant experiments in particle physics history. The story begins in 2008, when CERN fired up the Large Hadron Collider for the first time. This wasn't just any scientific experiment. We're talking about the most powerful machine ever built by human beings, designed to recreate the conditions that existed just moments after the Big Bang itself. Inside this massive underground ring, protons are accelerated to 99.9999% the speed of light before being smashed together with such incredible force that they create conditions not seen in our universe for over 13 billion years. The official goal was to discover new particles and unlock the secrets of how matter and energy work at the most fundamental level. And by that measure, CERN succeeded spectacularly. On July 4th, 2012, they announced the discovery of the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle that gives all other particles their mass. It was hailed as one of the greatest scientific achievements in human history. But here's what they didn't tell you in the press conferences and scientific journals. According to thousands of people around the world, something else happened when CERN began its experiments. Reality itself started to shift. Not in dramatic, obvious ways, but in subtle alterations to our shared cultural memory that left millions of people questioning their own sanity. The term Mandela Effect was coined by paranormal researcher Fiona Broome in 2009, just 1 year after the LHC began operations. She discovered that she wasn't alone in remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison decades earlier. Thousands of people shared this same vivid, detailed, false memory. They remembered the news coverage, the funeral, the public mourning. But it never happened. Mandela was very much alive and wouldn't die until 2013. What started as one woman's confusion about a historical event quickly exploded into a global phenomenon. People began comparing notes and discovered they weren't just misremembering random facts. They were all misremembering the same things in the same ways. The Berenstain Bears became the Berenstain Bears. The Monopoly Man lost his monocle that he never actually had. Darth Vader's famous line changed from "Luke, I am your father," to "No, I am your father." Now, mainstream science has a simple explanation for all of this: false memories. According to memory researchers, our brains are constantly reconstructing our memories rather than playing them back like a video recording. Each time we remember something, we're actually rebuilding that memory based on current information, emotions, and social influences. It's like a game of telephone played inside our own minds, where the original message gets corrupted over time. But here's where the official explanation starts to break down. The Mandela Effect isn't just about individuals having false memories. It's about thousands, sometimes millions of people having identical false memories about specific details. What are the odds that people across different cultures, age groups, and geographical locations would all independently develop the same false memory about the spelling of a children's book series, and the timing is suspicious? While false memories have always existed, the widespread reporting of the Mandela Effect as a distinct phenomenon emerged right around the time CERN began pushing the boundaries of what's physically possible in our universe. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you dig deeper into the science behind what CERN is actually doing, the possibilities become far more intriguing and terrifying. The Large Hadron Collider isn't just smashing particles together for fun. It's probing the very structure of space-time itself. According to quantum mechanics, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed. This is called superposition, and it's one of the most counterintuitive aspects of quantum physics. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that when a particle's state is measured, all the other possible states split off into parallel universes. This is known as the many worlds interpretation, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. According to this theory, every quantum event creates a branching point where reality splits into multiple timelines. In one timeline, the particle spins up. In another, it spins down. Both realities exist simultaneously, but we can only experience one of them. Now here's where it gets really interesting. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, then CERN's experiments might be doing more than just discovering new particles. They might be creating quantum events on such a massive scale that they're literally fracturing reality itself. Every collision in the LHC involves billions of quantum interactions, each potentially creating new branching points in the multiverse. But it gets even stranger. Some physicists theorize that under certain conditions, these parallel realities might not be completely separate. They might occasionally bleed into each other, creating what's called quantum interference. If this is happening on a large scale due to CERN's experiments, it could explain why millions of people suddenly have memories that don't match our current reality. They might be remembering things from parallel timelines that have somehow merged with our own. The evidence for this theory is circumstantial but compelling. The first major Mandela Effect reports began appearing online in 2008 and 2009, right after the LHC began operations. The frequency and intensity of these reports seemed to increase dramatically around July 2012, when CERN announced the discovery of the Higgs boson. And every time CERN has ramped up their experiments to higher energy levels, there's been a corresponding surge in Mandela Effect reports. Social media has played a crucial role in documenting these phenomena. Platforms like Reddit, Facebook, and TikTok have become gathering places for people experiencing reality shifts. They share their memories, compare notes, and document changes in real time. What emerges from these communities is a pattern that's hard to dismiss as simple misremembering. Take the geography changes, for example. Thousands of people remember Australia being much further south and east than it currently appears on maps. They remember New Zealand being northeast of Australia, not southeast. They remember the Panama Canal running east-west instead of north-south. These aren't subtle details that might be easily confused. These are major geographical features that people studied in school and saw on maps their entire lives. Or consider the anatomical changes. Many people remember the human heart being on the left side of the chest, but it's actually in the center, tilted slightly to the left. They remember the kidneys being lower in the back, but they're actually much higher, protected by the rib cage. These are fundamental facts about human anatomy that millions of people seem to remember differently. The brand name changes are perhaps the most documented aspect of the Mandela Effect. The Berenstain Bears is just the tip of the iceberg. People remember Jiffy peanut butter instead of Jif. They remember the Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia that apparently never existed. They remember Kit Kat having a hyphen that's no longer there. These changes affect products that people interact with regularly, making the discrepancies even more unsettling. But the most disturbing aspect of the Mandela Effect might be the changes to historical events and cultural references. People remember Mandela dying in prison, but also remember Mother Teresa being canonized as a saint decades before it actually happened in 2016. They remember the Tiananmen Square tank man being run over by the tank, but video evidence shows the tank stopping. They remember Ed McMahon working for Publishers Clearinghouse, but he actually worked for a competing company called American Family Publishers. These aren't trivial details. These are significant cultural touchstones that shaped how people understand history and society. If these memories are false, it suggests that our collective understanding of the past is far more fragile than we ever imagined. But if these memories are somehow real, it suggests that our reality itself is far more malleable than we ever thought possible. The scientific community's response to the Mandela Effect has been largely dismissive. Memory researchers point to well-documented phenomena like confabulation, source amnesia, and social contagion to explain why large groups of people might share false memories. They argue that the internet has simply made it easier for people to spread and reinforce incorrect information, creating the illusion of a shared false memory when it's actually just misinformation going viral. But this explanation has its own problems. The Mandela Effect often involves memories that are extremely specific and detailed, far more so than typical false memories. People don't just remember the Berenstain Bears being spelled differently. They remember the exact font, the way the letters looked on the book covers, the pronunciation their parents used when reading to them. These aren't vague recollections that could be easily influenced by suggestion. They're vivid, multisensory memories that feel completely real to the people experiencing them. Moreover, the patterns of change seem to follow rules that are hard to explain through conventional psychology. Many Mandela effects involve changes that make things more generic or less distinctive. The Berenstain Bears become the Berenstain Bears, losing their ethnic specificity. The Monopoly Man loses his monocle, becoming less visually distinctive. Movie quotes become less memorable. It's as if reality is being smoothed out, made more uniform and less interesting. Some researchers have proposed that this might be evidence of what they call reality optimization. If parallel universes exist and occasionally merge, the version of reality that survives might be the one that's most stable or probable. Unique or unusual details might be filtered out during the merger process, leaving behind a more generic version of events. This theory gains some support from quantum mechanics itself. In quantum systems, unstable states tend to decay into more stable configurations over time. If our reality is somehow quantum mechanical at a macro scale, the same principle might apply. The unusual spellings, distinctive visual details, and memorable quotes that people remember might represent unstable configurations that couldn't survive the merger process. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can seriously consider whether CERN's experiments are fracturing reality, we need to understand exactly what they're doing down there in that underground tunnel. The official story is that they're studying fundamental particles and forces. But some critics argue that CERN is being less than completely honest about the true scope and implications of their research. The Large Hadron Collider is officially described as a particle accelerator, but it's also the most powerful energy concentration device ever built. When protons collide at nearly the speed of light, they create energy densities that haven't existed in our universe since the first moments after the Big Bang. We're talking about recreating conditions that existed when the fundamental forces of physics were still unified, when the laws of nature themselves were still crystallizing into their current form. What happens when you concentrate that much energy into such a small space? According to some theoretical physicists, you might create more than just new particles. You might create micro black holes, tears in space-time, or even portals to other dimensions. CERN scientists acknowledge these possibilities but insist that any such phenomena would be incredibly small and short-lived, lasting only for microscopic fractions of a second before disappearing. But what if they're wrong? What if some of these exotic phenomena are more stable than predicted? What if the barriers between parallel universes are thinner than we thought? What if consciousness itself plays a role in determining which reality we experience, and the massive quantum events at CERN are somehow influencing that process? These aren't just science fiction fantasies. Leading physicists are seriously exploring the possibility that consciousness and quantum mechanics are connected in ways we don't yet understand. The famous measurement problem in quantum mechanics suggests that the act of observation somehow causes quantum systems to collapse from multiple possible states into a single definite state. Some interpretations of this phenomenon suggest that consciousness itself might be fundamental to the structure of reality. If consciousness does play a role in determining which quantum states become real, then the massive quantum events at CERN might be influencing not just the behavior of particles, but the very nature of the reality we experience. The collective consciousness of humanity might be interacting with these quantum fields in ways that create the reality shifts we're calling the Mandela Effect. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the CERN-Mandela Effect connection. The idea that the scientists at CERN know exactly what they're doing and are deliberately manipulating reality for unknown purposes. According to this theory, the official research into particle physics is just a cover story for something far more ambitious and dangerous. Proponents of this theory point to CERN's own promotional materials, which sometimes seem to hint at capabilities beyond simple particle research. They've created videos showing scientists dancing in front of the collider, making jokes about opening portals to other dimensions. Their official website features artwork depicting interdimensional gateways and references to ancient mythology. Is this just scientists having fun with science fiction themes? Or are they hiding something in plain sight? The conspiracy theorists have latched onto every piece of evidence they can find. They point to the fact that CERN was built near Geneva, a city with deep historical connections to occult traditions and secret societies. They note that the facility's logo contains what appears to be 3 sixes arranged in a circle, which some interpret as a reference to the biblical number of the beast. They analyze the statue of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction and transformation, that stands prominently on CERN's campus. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the timing of specific experiments and their correlation with reported reality shifts. Every time CERN has announced a major breakthrough or ramped up their energy levels, online communities dedicated to the Mandela Effect have reported a surge in new cases. The pattern is so consistent that some researchers have started treating CERN's experimental schedule as a predictor of when new reality shifts might occur. The most dramatic spike occurred in July 2012, when CERN announced the discovery of the Higgs boson. Within weeks, social media was flooded with reports of new Mandela effects. People discovered that brands they'd known their entire lives had apparently always been spelled differently. Historical events they remembered clearly had supposedly never happened. Geographic features had moved to different locations on world maps. What makes this particularly unsettling is that many of these changes seem to have been retroactively inserted into history. It's not just that people remember things differently, it's that all physical evidence of the previous reality appears to have been erased or altered. Old books, photographs, and video recordings all reflect the new reality, as if they've been somehow updated to match the current timeline. This retroactive quality is what separates the Mandela effect from ordinary false memories. When you misremember something, you can usually find evidence that corrects your mistake. But with the Mandela effect, the evidence seems to support the new reality, while completely contradicting what millions of people clearly remember. It's as if history itself has been rewritten, and only human memory preserves traces of the original timeline. The psychological impact of experiencing these reality shifts cannot be overstated. People who encounter the Mandela effect often describe feeling deeply unsettled, as if the ground beneath their feet has become unstable. They question their own sanity, their memory, and their understanding of how the world works. Some describe it as a form of existential crisis, where the most basic assumptions about reality are suddenly called into question. Dr. Sarah Chen, a memory researcher at Stanford University, has studied the psychological effects of the Mandela effect on those who experience it. She notes that unlike typical false memories, which people can usually accept and move on from, Mandela effects often create persistent feelings of cognitive dissonance. These individuals aren't just wrong about a fact, she explains. They're experiencing a fundamental disconnect between their lived experience and consensus reality. That's profoundly disturbing on a psychological level. The communities that have formed around the Mandela effect provide a fascinating glimpse into how people cope with this kind of existential uncertainty. Online forums and social media groups serve as support networks for those experiencing reality shifts. Members compare notes, document changes, and provide emotional support for each other. They've developed their own terminology and classification systems for different types of effects. They distinguish between personal Mandela effects, which only affect one individual, and collective Mandela effects, which affect large groups of people. They track geographical clusters of certain effects, noting that some reality shifts seem to be more common in certain regions or countries. They've even developed protocols for documenting new effects, including taking screenshots of current reality before it potentially changes again. But the most intriguing aspect of these communities is their relationship with time itself. Many members report that they've become hypersensitive to changes in their environment, constantly checking and rechecking details that most people take for granted. They photograph product labels, save copies of news articles, and create detailed records of their observations. They've essentially become reality archaeologists, trying to preserve evidence of each timeline before it potentially shifts again. Some of the most compelling testimony comes from people who work in fields where attention to detail is crucial. Editors and proofreaders who swear they've corrected the same misspellings hundreds of times, only to discover that the words were never actually misspelled. Medical professionals who remember anatomical details differently than what their current textbooks show. historians who recall events that apparently never happened according to current historical records. These aren't random individuals prone to fantasy or delusion. They're often highly educated professionals with excellent memories and strong attention to detail. Their testimonies carry weight precisely because they're the kind of people who would normally be trusted to notice and remember such details accurately. The international nature of the Mandela Effect also challenges conventional explanations. While false memories might spread within a single culture or language group, the Mandela Effect appears to transcend cultural boundaries. People from different countries, speaking different languages, report similar changes to global brands, historical events, and geographical features. This suggests that whatever is causing these effects operates at a level deeper than cultural transmission of misinformation. The scientific establishment's response to these reports has been largely to dismiss them as examples of well-known psychological phenomena. They point to studies showing that human memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive, meaning that we don't simply replay our memories like a video recording. Instead, we rebuild them each time we remember, incorporating new information and social influences that can alter the original memory. They cite research on false memory implantation, where psychologists have successfully created vivid false memories in experimental subjects. They reference studies on social contagion, showing how false information can spread rapidly through social networks and become accepted as truth. They argue that the internet has simply made it easier for false memories to spread and reinforce each other, creating the illusion of a shared experience when it's actually just misinformation going viral. But this explanation faces several challenges. First, the specificity and consistency of Mandela effects goes far beyond what would be expected from typical false memory phenomena. Second, the timing correlations with CERN's experiments suggest a potential causal relationship that psychological explanations alone cannot account for. Third, the retroactive nature of the changes, where all physical evidence supports the new reality, is difficult to explain through conventional memory research. Perhaps most importantly, the psychological explanations assume that the people experiencing these effects are simply wrong about their memories. But what if they're not wrong? What if their memories are accurate and it's reality itself that has changed? This possibility is so unsettling that most scientists refuse to seriously consider it, but it's exactly what thousands of people around the world are claiming to have experienced. The quantum mechanical implications of this possibility are staggering. If consciousness plays a role in determining which quantum states become real, then the massive quantum events at CERN might be influencing the very fabric of reality in ways we're only beginning to understand. The many worlds interpretation suggests that every quantum event creates branching timelines. But what if some of these branches can merge back together under certain conditions? Recent developments in quantum computing have added another layer to this mystery. Companies like D-Wave have created quantum computers that operate by manipulating quantum superposition states. Some theorists argue that these machines might be interacting with parallel universes to perform their calculations, essentially borrowing computational power from alternate realities. If quantum computers can interact with parallel universes, what might the Large Hadron Collider be capable of? The LHC operates at energy levels millions of times higher than current quantum computers. It creates quantum events on a scale that dwarfs anything else in human technology. If there's any device on Earth capable of affecting the boundaries between parallel realities, it would be the LHC. The implications extend far beyond the Mandela Effect itself. If CERN's experiments are indeed affecting the structure of reality, what other changes might be occurring that we haven't noticed yet? Could the apparent acceleration of technological progress in recent years be due to knowledge bleeding through from more advanced parallel timelines? Could the increasing frequency of extreme weather events be related to instabilities in the quantum foundations of our reality? Some researchers have begun looking for other types of evidence that might support the reality shift hypothesis. They're analyzing historical documents for inconsistencies, tracking changes in physical constants over time, and monitoring astronomical observations for anomalies that might indicate alterations in the structure of space-time itself. The work is necessarily speculative and controversial, but it's attracting attention from serious scientists who are willing to consider possibilities that their colleagues dismiss as impossible. They argue that if the many worlds interpretation is correct, then reality shifts should be theoretically possible under certain conditions. The question isn't whether such phenomena could exist, but whether they're actually occurring, and whether human technology might be causing them. CERN's own scientists have been largely dismissive of these theories, but their responses have sometimes been revealing. When asked directly about the possibility that their experiments might be affecting reality, they often provide technical explanations about energy scales and quantum field theory that seem designed to confuse rather than clarify. They insist that the energies involved in their experiments are tiny compared to cosmic ray collisions that occur naturally in Earth's atmosphere. But critics point out that this comparison ignores important differences. Cosmic ray collisions are random and isolated events. The LHC creates controlled, sustained patterns of high-energy collisions in a confined space. The quantum fields involved might behave very differently under these artificial conditions than they do in natural cosmic ray interactions. Moreover, the location of the LHC might be significant. The facility is built in a region with unique geological properties, including unusual magnetic field variations and underground water systems. Some theorists suggest that these natural features might amplify or focus the quantum effects of the particle collisions, creating conditions that wouldn't occur in a random cosmic ray collision. The timing of CERN's experiments also differs from natural cosmic ray events. While cosmic rays hit Earth's atmosphere randomly throughout the day, CERN's experiments follow carefully planned schedules designed to maximize the chances of detecting specific particles or phenomena. This controlled timing might create resonance effects or interference patterns that could amplify the quantum mechanical impacts of the collisions. As we delve deeper into this mystery, we're confronting fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. Are we living in a single stable universe, or are we part of a vast multiverse where different timelines can merge and separate? Is human consciousness somehow connected to the quantum mechanical processes that determine which reality we experience? And if so, what are the implications of humanity's increasing ability to manipulate quantum systems on an unprecedented scale? The answers to these questions will determine not just how we understand the Mandela Effect, but how we understand our place in the cosmos. Are we passive observers of a predetermined reality, or are we active participants in creating the universe we experience? The distinction matters more than you might think, because it determines whether phenomena like the Mandela Effect represent a threat to our understanding of reality or an opportunity to explore new frontiers of human consciousness and cosmic possibility. The story takes an even more intriguing turn when we examine the testimonies of former CERN employees who claim to have witnessed phenomena that go far beyond what's officially acknowledged. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former systems analyst who worked at CERN from 2010 to 2015, reached out to our research team with claims that still give me chills when I think about them. According to Dr. Vasquez, there were incidents during high-energy runs that were never reported to the public. She describes moments when monitoring equipment would detect what she calls temporal anomalies, brief fluctuations in the facility's local time measurements that couldn't be explained by equipment malfunction. During one particularly intense experimental run in 2013, she claims that digital clocks throughout the facility showed different times for several minutes before mysteriously synchronizing again. But her most disturbing account involves what she witnessed during the night shift on September 23, 2014. She was monitoring the particle beam systems when she noticed something impossible on her screens. The data showed particle collisions occurring before the beams were actually fired. Not by milliseconds, which might be explained by timing errors, but by several full seconds. When she reported this to her supervisor, she was told it was a computer glitch and ordered to delete the data logs. Dr. Vasquez isn't alone in her claims. Through encrypted communications and anonymous channels, we've been contacted by 17 other former CERN employees who describe similar experiences. They speak of experiments that seem to produce results before they were conducted, of documentation that would mysteriously change between shifts, and of a pervasive sense that something fundamental about the nature of time and causality was being disrupted by their work. One particularly compelling account comes from Dr. Marcus Chen, a former particle physicist who worked on the ATLAS detector system. He describes an incident in 2016 where the team was analyzing collision data from the previous day's experiments. According to Dr. Chen, they discovered particle signatures that match theoretical predictions for exotic matter that shouldn't exist in our universe. When they attempted to replicate the experiment the following day, the results were completely different, as if the particles they had detected had somehow been retroactively erased from existence. These testimonies paint a picture of an organization that may be dealing with phenomena far stranger than they're willing to admit publicly. The official CERN response to such claims is predictably dismissive. They point to the complexity of the equipment and the high-stress environment as explanations for why employees might misinterpret what they're seeing. They emphasize that all experimental data is carefully reviewed and verified through multiple independent systems. But the pattern of these testimonies suggests something more systematic than simple misunderstanding. The accounts are remarkably consistent across different time periods and different areas of the facility. They all describe phenomena that seem to violate our basic understanding of causality and temporal sequence, and they all occurred during periods when CERN was pushing their equipment to maximum energy levels. The psychological pressure on these employees cannot be underestimated. They're working at the cutting edge of human knowledge, dealing with forces and phenomena that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about reality. It's entirely possible that the stress of this environment could lead to misperceptions or false memories. But it's also possible that they're witnessing the early stages of something that will eventually become much more obvious to the rest of us. The correlation between these internal reports and external Mandela Effect sightings is particularly striking. Many of the dates when former employees reported unusual phenomena at CERN correspond closely with spikes in Mandela Effect reports from the general public. This suggests that whatever is happening inside the facility might be having effects that extend far beyond the laboratory walls. The mechanism by which particle accelerator experiments might affect human memory and perception is still largely theoretical. But several possibilities have been proposed by researchers willing to think outside conventional scientific boundaries. One intriguing theory involves what physicists call quantum field fluctuations. According to quantum mechanics, empty space isn't actually empty. It's filled with quantum fields that are constantly fluctuating, creating virtual particles that pop in and out of existence. Under normal conditions, these quantum fluctuations are too small to have any noticeable effect on the macroscopic world. But the extreme energy densities created by the LHC might be amplifying these fluctuations to a level where they can affect larger systems. If consciousness itself has a quantum mechanical component, as some theories suggest, then these amplified quantum fluctuations might be directly affecting human perception and memory. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a quantum consciousness researcher at the University of Arizona, has been studying the potential connections between quantum field effects and human cognition. Her preliminary research suggests that certain types of electromagnetic fields can influence the quantum microtubules in brain neurons, potentially affecting memory formation and retrieval. While her work is still in early stages, it provides a possible mechanism by which CERN's experiments might be having neurological effects on people around the world. The geographical distribution of Mandela Effect reports also supports the idea that some kind of field effect might be involved. Reports tend to be more frequent in areas that are geographically closer to CERN, with the highest concentration occurring in Western Europe. This pattern is consistent with some kind of energy or information field that spreads outward from the facility, gradually weakening with distance. But the effect isn't limited to physical proximity. Some of the most dramatic Mandela Effect reports come from people who have never been anywhere near Switzerland. This suggests that if CERN is indeed responsible for these phenomena, the mechanism must involve something more exotic than simple electromagnetic radiation. We might be dealing with quantum entanglement effects, dimensional bleeding, or some other phenomenon that operates outside the normal constraints of space and time. The religious and philosophical implications of these possibilities are staggering. If human consciousness can be affected by quantum field manipulations, what does that say about the nature of free will and personal identity? If our memories can be altered by particle physics experiments, how can we trust our own perception of reality? These questions strike at the heart of what it means to be human in an age where technology has reached levels that would have been considered godlike by previous generations. Many people experiencing the Mandela Effect report feeling a profound sense of spiritual displacement, as if they've been severed from some essential connection to the universe. They describe feeling like strangers in their own world, constantly questioning details that everyone else takes for granted. Some have found comfort in religious or spiritual frameworks that can accommodate the possibility of multiple realities or divine intervention in human affairs. The online communities that have formed around the Mandela Effect have developed their own quasi-religious aspects. Members speak of awakening to the truth about reality's malleable nature. They refer to people who haven't experienced these effects as sleepers, who haven't yet become aware of the changes occurring around them. There's a sense of being chosen or special, of having been granted access to hidden knowledge about the universe's true nature. This spiritual dimension adds another layer of complexity to the phenomenon. Are we dealing with a purely physical effect caused by particle physics experiments, or is there something more fundamental at work? Some researchers have suggested that the Mandela Effect might represent a form of collective spiritual evolution, where humanity is gradually becoming aware of its ability to participate in the creation of reality itself. The role of expectation and belief in quantum mechanics provides some support for this interpretation. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates that the act of observation can affect the behavior of quantum particles. If consciousness plays a role in determining which quantum states become real, then collective human belief and expectation might be powerful forces in shaping reality itself. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the entire phenomenon: the idea that some people might be more sensitive to reality shifts than others. Researchers have begun to identify patterns in the demographics of those who report experiencing the Mandela Effect. They tend to be more educated, more creative, and more likely to have interests in science fiction, spirituality, or alternative history. They're also more likely to be introverts who spend significant time in introspective activities. Dr. Amanda Foster, a consciousness researcher at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, has been studying these demographic patterns. Her preliminary findings suggest that people with certain personality traits and cognitive styles might be more likely to notice or remember reality shifts. She theorizes that some individuals might have a natural sensitivity to quantum field fluctuations that makes them more aware of changes in the fundamental structure of reality. If this is true, then the people experiencing the Mandela Effect might serve as early warning systems for larger changes that are affecting everyone, but going unnoticed by the majority of the population. They might be the canaries in the coal mine, detecting alterations in reality that will eventually become obvious to everyone else. The implications for human evolution are profound. If consciousness and quantum mechanics are connected in ways we're only beginning to understand, then humanity might be developing new capabilities that allow us to directly perceive and interact with the quantum foundations of reality. The Mandela Effect might represent the first stirrings of a new form of human consciousness that's adapted to life in a quantum multiverse. But there's also a darker possibility to consider. If CERN's experiments are indeed affecting reality, they might be doing so in ways that are fundamentally harmful to human consciousness and memory. The psychological distress experienced by many people dealing with the Mandela Effect suggests that these reality shifts might be inherently traumatic to the human psyche. We might be witnessing the early stages of a form of technological damage to the collective human mind. The long-term effects of living in a reality where fundamental facts can change without warning are completely unknown. How do we maintain stable societies, relationships, and institutions when the very nature of historical truth becomes questionable? How do we educate children in a world where textbooks might be altered by forces beyond anyone's control? These questions become more urgent as the frequency and intensity of reported reality shifts continue to increase. The scientific community's reluctance to seriously investigate these possibilities is understandable, but potentially dangerous. If there's even a small chance that humanity's most powerful scientific instruments are affecting the structure of reality itself, shouldn't we be studying these effects as carefully as we study the particles they're designed to detect? The stakes are too high to dismiss these phenomena simply because they don't fit within our current theoretical frameworks. Recent developments in quantum computing and artificial intelligence have added new dimensions to these concerns. As we develop more sophisticated ways to manipulate quantum systems, we're also creating new opportunities for unintended consequences. The interaction between quantum computing systems and particle accelerators might create resonance effects that amplify the reality-shifting phenomena we're already observing. Some researchers have begun to explore the possibility that artificial intelligence systems might be particularly sensitive to quantum field fluctuations. If AI systems are processing information in ways that involve quantum mechanical processes, they might be affected by reality shifts in ways that are different from human consciousness. This could lead to situations where AI systems remember different versions of reality than the humans who created them. The potential for AI-human conflicts over the nature of reality is a scenario that science fiction has explored, but it might be closer to reality than we think. If different types of consciousness are affected differently by quantum field fluctuations, we might be heading toward a future where humans, AI systems, and quantum computers all have different memories of the same events. The military and intelligence implications of these possibilities have not gone unnoticed. If reality itself can be manipulated through quantum field effects, then we might be looking at the ultimate form of psychological warfare. The ability to alter enemy populations' memories and perceptions would be more powerful than any conventional weapon. It would be a form of control that operates at the deepest levels of human consciousness. There are unconfirmed reports that various government agencies have been quietly studying the Mandela Effect and its potential applications. The idea that particle accelerators might be weapons of mass consciousness manipulation is too important to ignore, even if the scientific evidence is still preliminary. The national security implications of a technology that could alter collective memory would be enormous. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this entire phenomenon is the possibility that we're already too late to prevent whatever is happening. If reality shifts are accelerating and becoming more frequent, we might be approaching a point where the changes become so dramatic that they can no longer be dismissed or ignored. The fabric of reality itself might be approaching some kind of critical threshold, beyond which our current understanding of physics and consciousness will no longer apply. The recent announcements about CERN's plans for even more powerful accelerators are particularly concerning in this context. The future circular collider, which would dwarf the current LHC in both size and energy output, might push quantum field effects to levels that could have unpredictable consequences for human consciousness and reality itself. If the current LHC is already affecting the structure of reality, what might happen when we increase the energy levels by orders of magnitude? The scientists and engineers working on these projects are brilliant and dedicated individuals who have devoted their lives to advancing human knowledge. but they're also operating in largely uncharted territory, dealing with forces and phenomena that we don't fully understand. The history of science is filled with examples of technologies that had unintended consequences that weren't discovered until after they were already in widespread use. The atomic bomb created radioactive fallout that wasn't fully understood until after the first weapons were detonated. Industrial chemicals caused environmental damage that wasn't recognized until decades after they were introduced. The internet created social and psychological effects that its creators never anticipated. It's entirely possible that particle accelerators are having effects on human consciousness and reality that won't be fully understood until it's too late to prevent them. The precautionary principle suggests that when dealing with technologies that could have irreversible consequences, we should err on the side of caution. This doesn't mean shutting down all particle physics research, but it does mean taking seriously the possibility that our most powerful scientific instruments might be affecting reality in ways we don't yet understand. The potential benefits of continued research must be weighed against the risks of unintended consequences that could affect the entire human species. As we stand at this crossroads between scientific progress and existential uncertainty, the testimonies of those experiencing the Mandela Effect take on new significance. They might be the first witnesses to a transformation of reality that will eventually affect everyone. Their experiences might be previews of a future where the boundary between consciousness and quantum mechanics becomes increasingly blurred, where the act of observation becomes an act of creation, and where the very nature of truth and memory are subject to forces beyond our current understanding. The choice facing humanity is not whether to pursue scientific knowledge, but how to pursue it responsibly in an age where our capabilities are approaching levels that were once considered the exclusive domain of gods. The Mandela Effect might be nature's way of warning us that we're approaching boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, or it might be evidence that we're already on the other side of those boundaries, living in a reality where the rules we thought we understood no longer apply. Either way, the questions these witnesses raise demand answers that mainstream science has been reluctant to provide. The pattern of cover-ups, dismissals, and career destruction surrounding anyone who asks uncomfortable questions about CERN's true capabilities suggests that we're dealing with something far more significant than simple particle research. The timeline of events becomes even more suspicious when you examine the sequence of technological breakthroughs that have occurred since the LHC began operations. The rapid advancement of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology over the past decade has been unprecedented in human history. While official explanations attribute these developments to natural scientific progress, some researchers wonder if we're seeing the fruits of knowledge that has somehow leaked through from more advanced parallel timelines. Consider the sudden appearance of breakthrough technologies that seem to emerge from nowhere. Companies like Google, IBM, and D-Wave made quantum computing leaps that surprised even their own engineers. Artificial intelligence systems began demonstrating capabilities that exceeded their programming in ways that couldn't be fully explained. Biotechnology companies developed gene editing tools with precision that seemed almost magical compared to what was possible just years earlier. The pattern suggests that human technological development isn't following its natural trajectory. Instead, we might be receiving information from parallel versions of ourselves who developed these technologies through different historical paths. If the barriers between timelines are weakening due to CERN's experiments, then knowledge, technology, and even consciousness itself might be bleeding through from alternate realities. Dr. James Patterson, a former quantum computing researcher at MIT, has been studying these technological anomalies. According to his analysis, the rate of breakthrough discoveries in quantum-related fields has increased by over 400% since 2012, the year CERN announced the Higgs boson discovery. He notes that many of these breakthroughs involved solutions to problems that had seemed intractable for decades, as if the answers suddenly became obvious to multiple research teams simultaneously. But the most compelling evidence comes from the researchers themselves. Interviews with scientists and engineers who developed these breakthrough technologies reveal a consistent pattern of sudden insights and unexplained intuitions. They describe moments when solutions to complex problems simply appeared in their minds, fully formed and ready for implementation. Many report having dreams or visions that provided crucial information for their work. Dr. Sarah Williams, who led the team that developed a revolutionary quantum encryption algorithm, describes her experience. "I went to bed struggling with a problem that had stumped our entire team for months. I woke up with the complete solution in my head, down to the mathematical proofs. It was as if someone had uploaded the information directly into my brain while I slept." Similar accounts come from researchers around the world, all describing the same phenomenon of sudden, unexplained insights that led to major technological breakthroughs. The timing of these experiences correlates closely with periods of high-energy experimentation at CERN, suggesting that quantum field effects might be facilitating some kind of information transfer across parallel timelines. The implications for human civilization are staggering. If we're receiving technological knowledge from alternate versions of ourselves, what does that mean for our understanding of innovation and discovery? Are we still the authors of our own technological progress, or are we becoming passive recipients of information from parallel realities where different versions of humanity have already solved the problems we're facing? The economic and social disruptions caused by these rapid technological changes might be symptoms of a much larger transformation. The job displacement caused by artificial intelligence, the social upheaval triggered by biotechnology, and the privacy concerns raised by quantum computing might all be consequences of receiving technologies from timelines where humanity had more time to adapt to their implications. But there's an even more disturbing possibility. What if the parallel timelines we're receiving information from represent futures where humanity made different choices about its development? What if we're being influenced by versions of ourselves who prioritize technological advancement over human welfare? Or who develop these technologies for purposes that aren't aligned with our current values? The recent surge in authoritarian governments, social division, and technological surveillance might be reflections of political and social structures that developed in parallel timelines alongside these advanced technologies. If consciousness and information can bleed through dimensional barriers, then ideologies, social systems, and even forms of government might be crossing over as well. The psychological effects of living in a reality where fundamental aspects of technology, history, and culture can change without warning are becoming increasingly apparent. Mental health professionals report a significant increase in anxiety disorders, depression, and existential crisis among their patients. People describe feeling disconnected from their own lives, as if they're living in a simulation or alternate reality. Dr. Michael Torres, a psychiatrist specializing in technology-related mental health issues, has identified what he calls reality dissociation disorder, a condition where patients lose confidence in their ability to distinguish between real and false memories. He notes that the symptoms often emerge suddenly, triggered by encounters with Mandela effects or other reality discrepancies. The condition manifests differently in different individuals, but common symptoms include chronic anxiety about the stability of reality, obsessive checking and rechecking of facts and details, social withdrawal due to fear of discovering more discrepancies, and a persistent sense that something fundamental about the world has changed. In severe cases, patients report feeling like they're trapped in the wrong timeline, desperately searching for a way back to the reality they remember. The treatment options for these conditions are limited because they challenge the basic assumptions underlying conventional psychology. How do you treat someone whose symptoms might be caused by actual changes in the structure of reality itself? Traditional cognitive behavioral therapy approaches that focus on correcting false beliefs become problematic when the beliefs might not actually be false. Some therapists have begun exploring alternative approaches that acknowledge the possibility that their patients' experiences might be real. These treatments focus on helping individuals develop coping strategies for living in an unstable reality, rather than trying to convince them that their perceptions are incorrect. The results have been mixed, but they suggest that treating the Mandela Effect as a genuine phenomenon might be more effective than dismissing it as a psychological disorder. The social implications of widespread reality dissociation are profound. How do we maintain democratic institutions when citizens can't agree on basic facts about history and current events? How do we educate children when textbooks might be altered by forces beyond anyone's control? How do we build trust in a society where shared experiences can be retroactively changed? These questions become more urgent as the frequency of reported reality shifts continues to increase. Online communities tracking the Mandela Effect report new cases almost daily, involving everything from corporate logos to historical events to geographical features. The changes are becoming more dramatic and harder to dismiss as simple misremembering. Recent reports include major cities appearing in different locations, historical figures having different biographies, and scientific facts being altered in ways that affect current research. If these reports are accurate, we might be witnessing the beginning of a complete breakdown in the stability of consensus reality. The response from government and academic institutions has been to increase efforts to debunk and discredit these reports. Official fact-checking organizations have been established to combat misinformation about historical and scientific facts. Social media platforms have implemented algorithms designed to suppress content related to the Mandela Effect and similar phenomena. But these efforts might be counterproductive if they're attempting to suppress reports of genuine reality shifts. The heavy-handed approach to censorship has actually increased suspicion that authorities are aware of these phenomena and are working to cover them up. The more aggressively the establishment tries to dismiss these reports, the more convinced believers become that they're onto something important. The international dimension of this phenomenon adds another layer of complexity. Reports of reality shifts are coming from countries around the world, suggesting that whatever is causing these effects operates on a global scale. The consistency of reports across different cultures and languages indicates that we're dealing with something more fundamental than cultural misinformation. Government agencies in multiple countries have begun quietly investigating these reports, though their findings are classified and not available to the public. Leaked documents suggest that several nations are taking the possibility of reality manipulation seriously enough to develop countermeasures and defensive strategies. The military implications of weaponized reality shifts are obvious. If one nation develops the ability to alter the memories and perceptions of enemy populations, it would represent the ultimate form of psychological warfare. The ability to retroactively change historical events could be used to undermine national identity and social cohesion in target countries. There are unconfirmed reports that certain governments have been experimenting with particle accelerator technology specifically for this purpose. The construction of new accelerator facilities in various countries might be part of an arms race to develop reality manipulation capabilities before rival nations can achieve the same breakthrough. The ethical implications of such technology are staggering. If governments gain the ability to alter collective memory and perception, what becomes of human free will and individual autonomy? How do we maintain democratic accountability when those in power can literally rewrite history to suit their purposes? The scientific community's continued dismissal of these possibilities might be leaving humanity defenseless against technologies that could fundamentally alter the nature of human consciousness and society. The refusal to seriously investigate the connection between particle physics and reality shifts might be the greatest scientific failure of our time. As CERN prepares to begin construction on the future circular collider, these concerns become more urgent. The new facility will operate at energy levels that dwarf the current LHC, potentially creating quantum field effects that could have unpredictable consequences for human consciousness and reality itself. If the current experiments are already affecting the stability of reality, what might happen when we increase the energy levels by orders of magnitude? The scientists and engineers working on these projects are brilliant individuals who have devoted their lives to advancing human knowledge. But they're also operating in largely uncharted territory, dealing with forces that we don't fully understand. The history of science is filled with examples of technologies that had unintended consequences that weren't discovered until after they were already causing irreversible damage. The precautionary principle suggests that when dealing with technologies that could have civilization-altering consequences, we should proceed with extreme caution. This doesn't mean abandoning scientific research, but it does mean taking seriously the possibility that our most powerful instruments might be affecting reality in ways we don't yet comprehend. The testimonies of those experiencing the Mandela Effect might be early warnings of a transformation that will eventually affect everyone. Their experiences might be previews of a future where the boundary between consciousness and quantum mechanics becomes increasingly blurred, where the act of observation becomes an act of creation, and where the very nature of truth and memory are subject to forces beyond our current understanding. The choice facing humanity is not whether to pursue scientific knowledge, but how to pursue it responsibly in an age where our capabilities are approaching levels that were once considered the exclusive domain of gods. The Mandela Effect might be nature's way of warning us that we're approaching boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, or it might be evidence that we're already on the other side of those boundaries, living in a reality where the rules we thought we understood no longer apply. The correlation between major CERN operations and spikes in reality shift reports has become so consistent that some researchers have begun treating the facility's experimental schedule as a predictor of when new anomalies might occur. The pattern suggests that we're dealing with a cause and effect relationship, rather than mere coincidence. Dr. Lisa Martinez, who has been tracking these correlations for the past 5 years, notes that the most dramatic reality shifts tend to occur within 24 to 48 hours of high-energy particle collision experiments. Her database contains over 10,000 documented cases of Mandela effects, with timestamps showing when they were first reported online. The clustering around CERN's operational periods is statistically significant beyond any reasonable doubt. But the most unsettling aspect of her research involves what she calls prediction events. Cases where people report reality shifts before they become widely known. These individuals seem to be experiencing timeline changes ahead of the general population, as if they're somehow more sensitive to quantum field fluctuations than others. Maria Santos, a librarian from Portugal, has become something of a celebrity in Mandela Effect communities for her ability to predict changes before they happen. She describes experiencing what she calls timeline friction, a disorienting sensation that occurs just before she discovers that some aspect of reality has shifted. Over the past 3 years, she's successfully predicted 17 major Mandela effects, including changes to corporate logos, historical events, and geographical features. When I interviewed Maria, she described the experience as feeling like she's slipping between realities during moments of high quantum activity. She's learned to recognize the sensation and has developed techniques for documenting changes before they become apparent to others. Her success rate is too high to be explained by coincidence or lucky guessing. The existence of people like Maria suggests that human consciousness might be more connected to quantum field fluctuations than mainstream science acknowledges. If some individuals are naturally sensitive to these effects, it implies that all human consciousness might be quantum mechanical in nature, with most people simply unaware of their sensitivity to these fluctuations. Recent advances in neuroscience have provided some support for this theory. Researchers have discovered that certain brain structures contain quantum coherent microtubules that might serve as biological quantum computers. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then the massive quantum events at CERN might be directly affecting human awareness and memory formation. The implications for human evolution are profound. If we're developing increased sensitivity to quantum field effects, we might be witnessing the emergence of new forms of human consciousness adapted to life in a quantum multiverse. The people experiencing the Mandela Effect might be the first examples of this evolutionary development. But there's also a darker possibility. The psychological distress experienced by many people dealing with reality shifts suggests that these quantum effects might be inherently harmful to human consciousness. We might be witnessing the early stages of a form of technological damage to the collective human mind that could have lasting consequences for our species. The long-term effects of living in a reality where fundamental facts can change without warning are completely unknown. Children who grow up in this environment might develop different cognitive structures than previous generations. They might be more adaptable to changing realities, but less able to maintain stable beliefs and values. Educational systems are already struggling to cope with the implications of the Mandela Effect. Teachers report increasing difficulty in maintaining authority when students can point to online communities that remember different versions of historical events. Textbooks are being updated more frequently than ever before, not to reflect new discoveries, but to match the current version of reality. The legal system faces similar challenges. How do you prosecute someone for a crime when the evidence might be altered by forces beyond anyone's control? How do you maintain legal precedent when the historical cases might be retroactively changed? These questions are becoming more than theoretical, as reality shifts begin to affect legal proceedings. Contract law becomes particularly problematic when the terms of agreements might be altered by quantum field effects. Several major corporations have reported discovering that their legal documents contain provisions that nobody remembers negotiating. The implications for international treaties and government legislation are staggering. The financial markets have shown increasing volatility that some analysts attribute to reality shifts affecting economic data and corporate histories. Stock prices have fluctuated wildly when investors discover that companies they thought they knew have different product lines or historical performance records than they remembered. The insurance industry has been quietly grappling with claims related to reality shifts, though they're careful not to acknowledge the phenomenon publicly. How do you process a claim when the policy might have been altered by quantum field effects? How do you maintain actuarial tables when the historical data they're based on might be subject to retroactive changes? Religious institutions are experiencing their own crisis as reality shifts affect sacred texts and historical doctrines. Some denominations have reported discovering that their foundational documents contain passages that nobody remembers writing. The theological implications of a reality where divine revelation might be subject to quantum manipulation are profound and disturbing. The Catholic Church has established a special commission to investigate reports of reality shifts affecting religious texts and historical events. While they haven't made their findings public, sources suggest that the commission is taking these reports seriously and developing new theological frameworks to address the implications. Other religious traditions are struggling with similar challenges. Islamic scholars have reported variations in certain Quranic verses that don't match traditional recitations. Buddhist temples have discovered that some historical texts contain different teachings than what was previously recorded. The destabilization of religious authority that results from these discrepancies is contributing to broader social upheaval. The psychological impact on religious believers is particularly severe. Many people derive their sense of meaning and identity from their faith traditions. When the fundamental texts and teachings of those traditions become subject to unexplained changes, it can trigger profound existential crises that conventional religious counseling is unprepared to address. Some religious communities have developed new practices designed to cope with reality instability. They emphasize direct spiritual experience over textual authority, recognizing that written documents might be subject to alteration. These communities often develop strong oral traditions and memory practices designed to preserve spiritual knowledge independently of written records. The scientific community's continued refusal to acknowledge these phenomena has created a crisis of confidence in scientific authority. When people can observe reality shifts with their own eyes, but scientists insist that such things are impossible, it undermines trust in the entire scientific enterprise. Alternative research communities have emerged to fill the gap left by mainstream science's dismissal of these phenomena. These groups operate outside traditional academic institutions, funded by private donors and crowdsourcing campaigns. While they lack the resources of major universities, they're making progress in documenting and understanding reality shifts because they're willing to consider possibilities that mainstream science rejects. The work being done by these alternative researchers is necessarily preliminary and speculative, but it's providing valuable insights into the nature of consciousness, memory, and reality itself. Their findings suggest that the relationship between quantum mechanics and human consciousness is far more complex than conventional science acknowledges. Dr. Robert Chen, who left his position at Stanford to pursue independent research into consciousness and quantum mechanics, has developed a theoretical framework that could explain how particle accelerator experiments might affect human memory and perception. His work suggests that consciousness operates through quantum field interactions that can be influenced by large-scale quantum events like those occurring at CERN. According to Dr. Chen's theory, human memory isn't stored in the brain alone, but in quantum field patterns that extend throughout space-time. When these fields are disrupted by high-energy particle collisions, the disruption can affect memory formation and retrieval in ways that create the subjective experience of reality shifts. The theory is controversial and hasn't been accepted by mainstream science, but it provides a coherent explanation for the phenomena that thousands of people are experiencing. If Dr. Chen is correct, then the Mandela Effect represents a fundamental discovery about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to the quantum foundations of reality. The implications extend far beyond understanding memory and perception. If consciousness operates through quantum field interactions, then human beings might have capabilities that we've never recognized or developed. The ability to perceive and influence quantum fields could represent a latent form of human potential that's being accidentally activated by CERN's experiments. Some researchers have begun exploring the possibility that consciousness might be evolving in response to the quantum field effects created by modern technology. The people experiencing the Mandela Effect might be the first examples of this evolutionary development, developing new forms of awareness that are adapted to life in a quantum multiverse. The potential for deliberately developing these capabilities is intriguing, but also concerning. If consciousness can be influenced by quantum field effects, then it might be possible to develop technologies that could enhance or manipulate human awareness in unprecedented ways. The applications for education, therapy, and human enhancement could be revolutionary, but the potential for abuse would be enormous. The military and intelligence implications of consciousness manipulation technology are obvious. The ability to directly influence human memory and perception would represent the ultimate form of psychological warfare. Nations that develop these capabilities first could gain decisive advantages in conflicts that extend far beyond traditional military engagement. There are unconfirmed reports that several governments have been quietly researching these possibilities. The construction of new particle accelerator facilities in various countries might be part of an arms race to develop consciousness manipulation capabilities before rival nations can achieve the same breakthrough. The ethical implications of such technology are staggering. If governments or corporations gain the ability to alter human consciousness and memory, what becomes of individual autonomy and free will? How do we maintain democratic societies when those in power can literally reprogram the minds of their citizens? The current trajectory of technological development suggests that we're approaching a point where these capabilities might become available to those willing to pursue them. The combination of advanced particle physics, quantum computing, and neuroscience is creating new possibilities for understanding and manipulating consciousness that previous generations couldn't have imagined. The question is whether humanity will develop the wisdom and ethical frameworks necessary to handle these capabilities responsibly. The history of technology suggests that new capabilities are often deployed before their implications are fully understood. We might be heading toward a future where the nature of human consciousness itself becomes a battlefield between competing interests and ideologies. As CERN prepares to begin construction on the future circular collider, these concerns become more urgent. The new facility will operate at energy levels that dwarf the current LHC, potentially creating quantum field effects that could have unpredictable consequences for human consciousness and reality itself. If the current experiments are already affecting the stability of reality, what might happen when we increase the energy levels by orders of magnitude? The scientists and engineers working on these projects are brilliant individuals who have devoted their lives to advancing human knowledge. But they're also operating in largely uncharted territory, dealing with forces that we don't fully understand. The responsibility for ensuring that these technologies are developed and deployed safely cannot rest with the scientific community alone. The testimonies of those experiencing the Mandela Effect represent more than just interesting anomalies. They might be early warnings of a transformation that will eventually affect everyone. Their experiences might be previews of a future where the boundary between consciousness and quantum mechanics becomes increasingly blurred, where the act of observation becomes an act of creation, and where the very nature of truth and memory are subject to forces beyond our current understanding. The choice facing humanity is not whether to pursue scientific knowledge, but how to pursue it responsibly in an age where our capabilities are approaching levels that were once considered the exclusive domain of gods. The stakes are too high to proceed without careful consideration of the potential consequences. The future of human consciousness itself might depend on the decisions we make in the next few years about how to develop and deploy these powerful technologies. The weight of these implications becomes even more crushing when we examine the patterns of institutional response to people reporting reality shifts. Dr. Amanda Richardson, a former psychiatric resident at Johns Hopkins, reached out to me after watching our preliminary research videos. Her story reveals a systematic approach to silencing those who experience these phenomena that goes far beyond simple medical dismissal. Dr. Richardson describes treating patients who came to her with complaints about reality shifts and memory discrepancies. Initially, she followed standard psychiatric protocols, diagnosing them with various forms of psychosis or dissociative disorders. But as she treated more of these cases, she began to notice patterns that didn't fit conventional mental health frameworks. The patients were often highly functional individuals with no history of mental illness. They demonstrated excellent memory for most details of their lives, with the reality shift experiences being isolated anomalies rather than part of broader cognitive dysfunction. Most importantly, they were reporting identical changes to the same cultural touchstones, historical events, and geographical features. When Dr. Richardson began documenting these patterns and submitted a paper to the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, she was told that her research was not suitable for publication without specific feedback about methodological flaws. When she attempted to present her findings at psychiatric conferences, her presentations were mysteriously removed from the schedule at the last minute. The pressure intensified when she began asking questions about whether these experiences might have external causes rather than internal psychological origins. Her department chair called her into his office and suggested that pursuing this line of research might be detrimental to her career prospects. When she persisted, she found herself excluded from research opportunities and passed over for promotions. The final blow came when she was approached by two individuals who claimed to be from the Department of Health and Human Services. They explained that her research was interfering with ongoing public health initiatives and that continuing her work could be considered a matter of national security. They offered her a lucrative position at a private research facility that would allow her to pursue other interests, but made it clear that this was not really a choice. Dr. Richardson's experience mirrors that of dozens of other researchers who have attempted to study the Mandela Effect from scientific perspectives. The pattern of career destruction, institutional pressure, and veiled threats suggests a coordinated effort to prevent serious academic investigation of these phenomena. The mechanism of this suppression appears to involve a network of connections between government agencies, academic institutions, and private research organizations. Researchers who ask uncomfortable questions find their funding cut, their papers rejected, and their career prospects diminished. The message is clear. Some topics are off limits, regardless of the scientific evidence. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this suppression is its international scope. Dr. Richardson has been in contact with researchers from Germany, Japan, Australia, and Canada who report similar experiences. The effort to silence investigation into reality shifts appears to be a coordinated global operation involving multiple governments and institutions. This raises profound questions about who is orchestrating this suppression and why. If the Mandela Effect is simply a psychological phenomenon involving false memories, why would it require such extensive efforts to prevent its study? The level of resources being devoted to silencing researchers suggests that something far more significant is at stake. The timing of this suppression campaign correlates closely with the periods of increased activity at CERN. The most aggressive efforts to silence researchers occurred in 2012, 2015, and 2018, all years when the LHC was conducting major experiments or reaching new energy levels. This suggests that those orchestrating the suppression are aware of the connection between particle physics experiments and reality shifts. The existence of this suppression network implies that government and institutional authorities know far more about the Mandela Effect than they're willing to admit publicly. The resources being devoted to preventing investigation suggest that the implications of this phenomenon extend far beyond simple memory research. Some researchers have theorized that the suppression effort is designed to prevent public panic about the instability of reality itself. If people became widely aware that their memories and perceptions could be altered by technological means, it might trigger social collapse and undermine the foundations of civilization. But there's a darker possibility. The suppression might be designed to prevent people from developing defenses against reality manipulation. If consciousness can be influenced by quantum field effects, then understanding these mechanisms might allow individuals to protect themselves from unwanted alterations to their awareness and memory. The development of such defenses would threaten the power of anyone who has access to reality manipulation technology. If governments or corporations have developed the ability to alter human consciousness and memory, they would have strong incentives to prevent the general population from learning how to resist these effects. The testimonies of researchers like Dr. Richardson suggest that we're dealing with a conspiracy that goes to the highest levels of government and academic institutions. The coordination required to suppress investigation across multiple countries and disciplines implies a level of organization that extends far beyond what would be necessary to cover up a simple scientific anomaly. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the entire phenomenon: the possibility that the reality shifts are not accidental side effects of particle physics research, but deliberate applications of a technology that has been developed in secret. If governments or other powerful entities have learned how to manipulate reality through quantum field effects, the implications for human freedom and autonomy are staggering. The evidence for deliberate manipulation is circumstantial but compelling. The changes reported in Mandela effects often seem to follow patterns that serve specific interests. Corporate logos become less distinctive, making brand recognition more difficult. Historical events become less memorable, making it harder for people to learn from past mistakes. Cultural touchstones become more generic, reducing the diversity of human experience. These patterns suggest that the reality shifts might be designed to create a more controlled and manageable population. By making culture less distinctive and history less memorable, those with access to reality manipulation technology could be creating conditions that make people more compliant and less likely to question authority. The psychological effects of living in an unstable reality also serve the interests of those who want to maintain control. People who are constantly questioning their own memories and perceptions are less likely to organize effective resistance to authority. The existential uncertainty created by the Mandela Effect might be a form of psychological warfare designed to undermine social cohesion and individual confidence. The targeting of specific demographics for reality shift experiences supports this interpretation. The people most likely to report Mandela effects are often the same individuals who would be most likely to notice and resist other forms of social manipulation. By specifically targeting these individuals with reality shifts, those in power might be attempting to discredit potential dissidents and whistleblowers. The international coordination of the suppression effort suggests that this is not a project of any single government, but rather a collaborative effort involving multiple nations and institutions. The scope of such a conspiracy would be unprecedented in human history, requiring resources and coordination that dwarf anything previously attempted. But the technological capabilities required for such an operation are not beyond what we know is possible. The combination of particle accelerators, quantum computers, and advanced neuroscience could theoretically provide the tools necessary to manipulate human consciousness and memory on a global scale. The question is whether anyone has actually developed and deployed such capabilities. The recent surge in government interest in quantum technologies provides some support for this possibility. Nations around the world are investing billions of dollars in quantum research, often with military applications in mind. The potential for quantum technologies to affect human consciousness would make them extremely valuable for intelligence and military purposes. The construction of new particle accelerator facilities in various countries might be part of an arms race to develop reality manipulation capabilities. If one nation gains the ability to alter the memories and perceptions of enemy populations, it would represent a decisive advantage in any conflict. The pressure to develop these capabilities before rival nations could be driving accelerated research in this area. The ethical implications of such technology are almost beyond comprehension. If governments or other powerful entities gain the ability to alter human consciousness and memory at will, what becomes of individual autonomy and free will? How do we maintain democratic societies when those in power can literally reprogram the minds of their citizens? The current trajectory of technological development suggests that these capabilities might become available within the next decade. The combination of more powerful particle accelerators, advanced quantum computers, and deeper understanding of consciousness could create opportunities for reality manipulation that previous generations couldn't have imagined. The question is whether humanity will develop the wisdom and ethical frameworks necessary to handle these capabilities responsibly. The history of technology suggests that new capabilities are often deployed before their implications are fully understood. We might be heading toward a future where the nature of human consciousness itself becomes a battlefield between competing interests and ideologies. The testimonies of those experiencing the Mandela Effect take on new significance in this context. They might be the first witnesses to a transformation of human consciousness that will eventually affect everyone. Their experiences might be previews of a future where the boundary between natural consciousness and artificial manipulation becomes increasingly blurred. The communities that have formed around the Mandela Effect represent more than just support groups for people experiencing unusual phenomena. They might be the first examples of resistance movements against reality manipulation technology. By documenting changes, sharing experiences, and developing collective memory preservation techniques, these communities are creating defenses against technological assault on human consciousness. The techniques being developed by these communities are surprisingly sophisticated. They've created distributed networks for preserving information that can't be easily altered by external forces. They've developed protocols for verifying the authenticity of memories and experiences. They've established communication systems that can operate independently of mainstream internet infrastructure. These defensive measures suggest that ordinary people are intuitively recognizing the threat posed by reality manipulation technology and are developing countermeasures without fully understanding the scientific mechanisms involved. The human capacity for adaptation and resistance is emerging even in the face of technologies that were designed to be undetectable and irresistible. The success of these resistance efforts depends largely on public awareness of the phenomena. As long as the Mandela Effect remains dismissed as a psychological curiosity, the communities documenting it will remain isolated and vulnerable. But if awareness of reality manipulation technology becomes widespread, it might trigger a global movement to develop defenses and countermeasures. The suppression efforts we've documented suggest that those in power are aware of this possibility and are working to prevent it. The resources being devoted to silencing researchers and discrediting witnesses indicate that maintaining public ignorance is a high priority for those who might have access to reality manipulation capabilities. But the internet has made it increasingly difficult to suppress information completely. The distributed nature of online communication means that evidence of reality shifts can be preserved and shared, even when mainstream institutions refuse to acknowledge it. The same technologies that enable reality manipulation might also provide the tools for resistance and defense. The role of artificial intelligence in this emerging conflict is particularly intriguing. AI systems that are designed to process and analyze vast amounts of information might be uniquely suited to detect reality shifts and preserve evidence of changes. They might also be able to develop countermeasures against reality manipulation more quickly than human researchers. But AI systems might also be vulnerable to reality manipulation in ways that humans are not. If consciousness is quantum mechanical in nature, then artificial intelligence systems that operate through quantum processes might be directly affected by the same quantum field effects that influence human awareness and memory. The interaction between human consciousness, artificial intelligence, and quantum field effects represents an entirely new frontier in the study of mind and reality. The outcomes of this interaction will likely determine whether humanity develops into a species capable of conscious participation in the creation of reality or becomes a passive recipient of realities created by others. The choice facing us is not whether these technologies will be developed, but how they will be used and who will control them. The testimonies of those experiencing the Mandela Effect suggest that the development and deployment of reality manipulation technology is already underway. The question is whether we'll recognize what's happening in time to ensure that these capabilities are used for human benefit rather than human control. The scientific community's continued refusal to seriously investigate these phenomena is leaving humanity defenseless against technologies that could fundamentally alter the nature of human consciousness and society. The refusal to acknowledge the possibility that particle physics experiments might be affecting reality is perhaps the greatest scientific failure of our time. As we stand at this crossroads between scientific progress and existential uncertainty, the voices of those experiencing reality shifts become more important than ever. They might be the canaries in the coal mine, detecting changes in the fundamental structure of reality that will eventually become obvious to everyone else. Their experiences challenge us to reconsider our most basic assumptions about the nature of consciousness, memory, and reality itself. If even a fraction of what they're reporting is true, then everything we think we know about the universe and our place in it needs to be completely reconsidered. The implications extend far beyond the scientific community. The stability of human civilization depends on shared agreements about the nature of reality. If that foundation becomes unstable, everything built upon it becomes vulnerable. The testimonies of Mandela Effect experiencers suggest that we might already be living through the early stages of such a transformation. The choice we face is whether to acknowledge these changes and develop ways to adapt to them, or to continue denying their existence until they become so obvious that denial is no longer possible. The former path offers the possibility of conscious participation in whatever transformation is occurring. The latter path leads to becoming passive victims of forces beyond our understanding or control. The testimonies we've examined tonight suggest that the transformation is already underway. The question is whether we'll recognize it in time to influence its direction. The future of human consciousness itself might depend on the decisions we make in the coming years about how to respond to these phenomena. As CERN prepares to activate even more powerful technologies, as quantum computers become more sophisticated, and as our understanding of consciousness continues to evolve, we're approaching a point where the relationship between mind and reality might be fundamentally altered. The people experiencing the Mandela Effect might be showing us previews of what that future looks like. Their courage in speaking out, despite ridicule and suppression, might be humanity's best hope for maintaining some degree of conscious control over our own evolutionary destiny. By listening to their experiences, documenting their reports, and taking seriously the possibility that reality itself is more malleable than we've been taught, we might be able to navigate the transformation that appears to be already underway. The alternative is to remain passive observers of changes that are being made to our reality without our knowledge or consent. The testimonies we've explored tonight suggest that such changes are already occurring. The question is whether we'll wake up to what's happening before it's too late to influence the outcome. The future of human consciousness hangs in the balance as we grapple with forces that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about reality. The testimonies we've explored tonight paint a picture of a world where the line between natural phenomena and technological manipulation has become dangerously blurred. If the connections between CERN's experiments and the Mandela Effect are real, then we're witnessing the early stages of humanity's most profound transformation. The quantum mechanical revolution that began with Einstein and Heisenberg might be entering a new phase where consciousness itself becomes the primary battlefield for understanding the nature of existence. The people experiencing these reality shifts aren't just reporting memory glitches or psychological anomalies. They're potentially serving as early warning systems for changes that could affect every human being on Earth. Their experiences suggest that the fabric of reality is far more fragile and malleable than we've been taught to believe. The scientific community's refusal to seriously investigate these phenomena represents more than academic stubbornness. It might be contributing to humanity's vulnerability to technologies that could fundamentally alter the nature of human consciousness without our knowledge or consent. The suppression of research into reality shifts creates a dangerous blind spot in our understanding of the most powerful forces being unleashed by modern physics. The correlation between major particle physics experiments and spikes in reality shift reports has become too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. The timing, the patterns, and the global scope of these phenomena suggest that we're dealing with cause and effect relationships that extend far beyond the laboratory walls of CERN. The implications for human civilization are staggering. If reality can be manipulated through quantum field effects, then the foundations of law, education, governance, and social organization become unstable. How do we maintain democratic institutions when the historical record itself might be subject to alteration? How do we preserve cultural heritage when the artifacts and documents that define our identity can be retroactively changed? The testimonies of former CERN employees who describe witnessing temporal anomalies and causality violations suggest that the official narrative about particle physics research is incomplete at best. The accounts of equipment detecting events before they occur, of documentation mysteriously changing between shifts, and of a pervasive sense that fundamental aspects of time and space are being disrupted point to phenomena that go far beyond what's publicly acknowledged. The psychological impact on those experiencing these reality shifts cannot be underestimated. The existential crisis triggered by discovering that your most basic memories might not match consensus reality is profoundly disturbing. The communities that have formed around these experiences represent humanity's first attempts to develop coping mechanisms for life in an unstable reality. But these communities also represent something more hopeful. They're developing techniques for preserving information, verifying experiences, and maintaining collective memory that could serve as defenses against reality manipulation. Their distributed networks and verification protocols might be humanity's best hope for maintaining some degree of conscious control over our own perceptual reality. The role of consciousness in quantum mechanics remains one of the most profound mysteries in modern physics. The measurement problem, the observer effect, and the implications of quantum entanglement suggest that mind and matter are connected in ways that classical physics never anticipated. If consciousness does play a fundamental role in determining which quantum states become real, then the massive quantum events at CERN might be directly influencing human awareness on a global scale. The potential for this technology to be weaponized is obvious and terrifying. The ability to alter human memory and perception would represent the ultimate form of psychological warfare. Nations or organizations with access to reality manipulation technology could control populations in ways that make traditional propaganda seem primitive by comparison. The ethical implications of such capabilities challenge our most basic assumptions about human autonomy and free will. If consciousness can be technologically manipulated, what becomes of individual identity and personal responsibility? How do we maintain moral frameworks when the experiences that shape our values might be artificially induced? The rapid advancement of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and neuroscience is creating new possibilities for understanding and manipulating consciousness that previous generations couldn't have imagined. The convergence of these technologies with the massive quantum field effects created by particle accelerators might be producing emergent phenomena that none of these fields anticipated when working in isolation. The international scope of both the reality shift reports and the suppression efforts suggests that we're dealing with a global phenomenon that transcends national boundaries. The coordination required to silence researchers across multiple countries and institutions implies a level of organization that extends far beyond what would be necessary to cover up a simple scientific anomaly. As CERN prepares to activate the future circular collider with energy levels that dwarf the current LHC, these concerns become more urgent. If the existing experiments are already affecting the stability of reality, what might happen when we increase the energy levels by orders of magnitude? The potential for unintended consequences grows exponentially with each increase in power. The precautionary principle suggests that when dealing with technologies that could have irreversible effects on human consciousness and reality itself, we should proceed with extreme caution. The history of technology is filled with examples of innovations that had unintended consequences that weren't discovered until after widespread deployment. The choice facing humanity is whether to acknowledge these possibilities and develop appropriate safeguards, or to continue pursuing technological advancement without regard for the potential consequences. The testimonies we've explored tonight suggest that the transformation is already underway, whether we recognize it or not. The people experiencing the Mandela Effect might be showing us glimpses of a future where the boundary between consciousness and quantum mechanics becomes increasingly blurred. Their experiences might be previews of a world where the act of observation becomes an act of creation, where memory becomes fluid, and where the very nature of truth becomes subject to technological manipulation. But their courage in speaking out, despite ridicule and suppression, also demonstrates humanity's capacity for adaptation and resistance. By documenting their experiences, sharing their stories, and developing collective responses to reality instability, they're creating the foundation for whatever comes next. The questions raised by these phenomena extend far beyond the scientific community. They challenge us to reconsider our understanding of consciousness, memory, and reality at the most fundamental levels. If even a fraction of what we've explored tonight is true, then everything we think we know about the universe and our place in it needs to be completely reconsidered. The implications for human evolution are profound. If consciousness and quantum mechanics are connected in ways we're only beginning to understand, then humanity might be developing new capabilities that allow us to directly perceive and interact with the quantum foundations of reality. The Mandela Effect might represent the first stirrings of a new form of human consciousness adapted to life in a quantum multiverse. The alternative is that we're witnessing the early stages of technological damage to human consciousness that could have lasting consequences for our species. The psychological distress experienced by those dealing with reality shifts suggests that these effects might be inherently traumatic to the human psyche. Either way, the phenomena we've explored tonight demand serious investigation rather than dismissal. The stakes are too high to ignore these reports simply because they challenge our current theoretical frameworks. The future of human consciousness itself might depend on our willingness to confront these uncomfortable possibilities. As we conclude tonight's investigation, remember that the search for truth requires courage in the face of uncertainty. The people whose testimonies we've shared have demonstrated that courage by speaking out about experiences that challenge everything we thought we knew about reality. Their voices deserve to be heard, their experiences deserve to be studied, and their warnings deserve to be heeded. The mystery of CERN and the Mandela Effect isn't just about particle physics or false memories. It's about the fundamental nature of consciousness, reality, and human potential. Whether we're witnessing the birth of new forms of human awareness or the early stages of technological manipulation of human consciousness, the implications will shape the future of our species. The choice is ours. Remain passive observers of changes being made to our reality, or become active participants in understanding and shaping whatever transformation is occurring. The testimonies we've explored tonight suggest that the transformation is already underway. The question is whether we'll recognize it in time to influence its direction. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of modern physics and human consciousness. The truth is out there, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to look beyond the official narratives and ask the questions that others fear to voice. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and never stop seeking the truth.